The Japanese Operation Battle of Midway, like the earlier attack on Pearl Harbor, sought to eliminate the United States as a strategic power in the Pacific, thereby giving Japan a free hand in establishing its Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. Japan expected to beat the U.S. Pacific Fleet while securing dominance in the region, and then coercing a negotiated peace. But that was not what happened. The Battle of Midway was a decisive naval battle in the Pacific theater of World War II that took place between the 4th and 7th of June 1942, only 6 months after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, and 1 month after the Battle of the Coral Sea. The United States Navy under Admirals Chester Nimitz, Frank Jack Fletcher, and Raymond A. Spruance defeated an attacking fleet of the Imperial Japanese Navy under Admirals Isoroku Yamamoto, Shuichi Nagumo, and Nobutake Kondo near Midway Atoll, inflicting devastating damage on the Japanese fleet that proved irreparable. Yamamoto's primary strategic goal was the elimination of America's carrier forces, which he regarded as the principal threat to the overall Pacific campaign. Yamamoto judged that it was now too risky to attack Pearl Harbor directly, considering the increased strength of American land-based air power on the Hawaiian Islands since the 7th of December attack in the previous year. He selected Midway, a tiny atoll at the extreme northwest end of the Hawaiian island chain, approximately 1,300 miles from Oahu. Midway was not especially important in the larger scheme of Japan's intentions, but the Japanese felt the Americans would consider Midway a vital outpost of Pearl Harbor and would therefore be compelled to defend it vigorously. Yamamoto's battle plan for taking Midway, named Operation MI, was exceedingly complex. His design was predicated on optimistic intelligence suggesting that USS Enterprise and USS Hornet, forming Task Force 16, were the only carriers available to the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Yamamoto's supporting battleships and cruisers trailed Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's carrier force by several hundred miles. They were intended to come up and destroy whatever elements of the U.S. fleet might come to Midway's defense once Nagumo's carriers had weakened them sufficiently for a daylight gun battle. What Yamamoto did not know was that the U.S. had broken the main Japanese naval code, dubbed JN-25 by the Americans, divulging many details of his plan to the enemy. Since early 1942, the U.S. had been decoding messages stating that there would soon be an operation at Objective AF. It was initially not known where AF was, but Commander Joseph Rochefort and his team at Station Hypo were able to confirm that it was Midway. Hypo was also able to determine the date of the attack as either able to confirm that it was Midway and to provide Nimitz with a complete IJN order of battle. As a result, the Americans entered the battle with a very good picture of where, when, and in what strength the Japanese would appear. Nimitz knew that the Japanese had negated their numerical advantage by dividing their ships into 4 separate task groups, all too widely separated to be able to support each other. This dispersal resulted in few fast ships being available to escort the carrier striking force, reducing the number of anti-aircraft guns protecting the carriers. Nimitz calculated that the aircraft on his 3 carriers, plus those on Midway Island, gave the U.S. rough parity with Yamamoto's 4 carriers, mainly because American carrier air groups were larger than Japanese ones. At 4:30 on June the 4th, Nagumo launched 4 Japanese aircraft carriers to attack and severely damage the U.S. base on Midway. Beyond the Japanese's awareness, the U.S. carrier forces were just to the east of the island and fully ready for battle. After their initial attacks, the Japanese aircraft headed back to their carriers to rearm and refuel. While the aircraft were returning, the Japanese Navy were aware that U.S. naval forces were in the area waiting for them. TBD Devastator torpedo bombers and SBD Dauntless dive bombers from the USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and USS Yorktown attacked the Japanese fleet. The Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were hit, set ablaze, and abandoned. Hiryu, the only surviving Japanese carrier, responded with 2 waves of attacks, both times bombing the USS Yorktown, leaving it severely damaged but still afloat. On the afternoon of June 4th, a USS Yorktown scout plane located the Hiryu, and the Enterprise sent dive bombers to attack. That attack left the Hiryu burning and without the ability to launch aircraft before it finally sank. In the late afternoon of the 6th of June, the Japanese submarine I-168, which had managed to slip through the cordon of destroyers, fired a salvo of torpedoes, 2 of which struck Yorktown. There were few casualties aboard, since most of the crew had already been evacuated, but a third torpedo from this salvo struck the destroyer USS Hammond. With further salvage efforts deemed hopeless, the remaining repair crews were evacuated from Yorktown, which sank just after 5 o'clock on June the 7th. The Japanese lost approximately 3,057 men, 4 carriers, 1 cruiser, and hundreds of aircraft, while the United States lost approximately 307 men, 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, and 144 aircraft. The Battle of Midway has often been called the turning point of the Pacific. It was the Allies' first major naval victory against the Japanese, despite the Japanese Navy having more forces and experience than its American counterpart. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos of history.